Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyamani Ishkarine. So I believe this is a conversation with Srila Prabhupada. That is another foolishness. If you are a fool, and if you want to pose yourself as intelligent, that is another foolishness. You cannot make progress. You must take the right knowledge. That is intelligence. And if you want to remain in ignorance and advertise yourself that, quote, I am a man of knowledge, how much a cheater you are. You are cheating yourself and you are cheating others. That is going on. We want to stop this. So, this theme often comes up especially in conversations. When someone doesn't know something and they're teaching, or they don't, how should we say it? They can either not know it and know they don't know it and still teach, or they could not know it and know they don't know it. Which is what Prabhupada is referring to here, it seems. We told that story the other day. That Srila Prabhupada met a professor of Hinduism, and he asked the professor, what is Hinduism? The professor couldn't say. So Prabhupada wanted to make this point to the professor that if you don't know, how can you teach it? That would be cheating. Just like you say, how do I get to the temple? And I don't know, and I say, go that way. That's going away from the temple. So an honest man will say, I don't know. I can't tell you. It's hard to be honest, but here's another example Prabhupada gives. If you want to become God, that means you are not God now. But how can somebody who is not God become God? God is God. He never has to become God by any mystic yoga process. He is already God. Krishna is God when he is on the lap of his mother, Yashoda. He is God when he is tending the cows with his friends. He is God when he is speaking the Bhagavad Gita on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. God is always God, not that by some mystic yoga process he becomes God. You are not God, nor can you become God. God is in your heart, and if you surrender to him, you can become godly. He is ready to help you. But if you try to become God, you are only cheating yourself. If you want to become God, then why should God help the competition? You understand?
But he's helping competition because he gave us these materials to be true gods.
He's showing them they're not God. He's letting them think they're God. There was one so-called God, and he had a toothache. And he had to go to the dentist. So Prabhupada remarked, what kind of God has to go to the dentist for a toothache? That means he's under control of the forces of this world, and by definition, God is the controller. If you want to become God, then why should God help the competition? But if you want to serve God, then God will give you all facility. So what do you think? Do you want to become God, or do you want to serve God? This was an answer to a question. And Prabhupada was asked, is God Personal or impersonal? I think that was the question. And Prabhupada said, what do you want? What's your goal? No, Prabhupada said, what's your goal spiritually? You want to become God? You want to serve God? This is a story by Giriraj Swami, and when Prabhupada answered his question, Haribol, Haribol, Haribol. Beautiful kirtan. Nitai Gauranga, Nitai Gauranga. When Prabhupada answered his question, after Prabhupada answered his question, Prabhupada said, what do you want? You want to serve God or you want to become God? And at that moment he realized that actually he wanted to become God. But he never had contemplated that. But then he understood that that could never happen. So now, if you give me a moment, we have to read a chapter from my book. This is not intended as an advertisement, but it may work it may work in my favor of selling more books. Wait a minute, maybe a faster way. I've been deceived. Hold on. We'll go anywhere. Okay, do it the hard way. I have to go find the final version, then go to the chapter. Okay, hold on. This is a very interesting topic. I find it interesting. I just have to get the table of contents, find the chapter, and then we're good. Okay. You have an actual copy? Then you have to give me glasses also. No, I found it. We're going to be there in less than 3 seconds. We're there. This chapter is entitled Self-Envy. Are we sabotaging ourselves? So I'm discussing this term that Prabhupada used, self-envy, and he'll explain it because, as I said before, it doesn't seem to make sense that you would envy yourself because you envy what someone has that you don't have, or you don't want them to have it. And why wouldn't you want yourself to have it? Oh, maybe if we're emotionally disturbed, maybe we don't feel we deserve it. We can envy ourselves that way. But Prabhupada has a spiritual definition. In this chapter, I discuss the importance of taking personal responsibility for our own spiritual lives. Prabhupada often quoted the expression, man is the architect of his own fortune. Despite all the help or good association we get, ultimately we have to do the spiritual work of improving ourselves to avoid self-envy and its detrimental effects. So what does that mean? Well, that will be explained. I won't explain it. We have to do the spiritual work of improving ourselves to avoid self-envy. So that will be explained. If that doesn't make sense, stay tuned. Where you and I are today in our spiritual lives is no accident. If we want to go further, we'll need to change or improve on something we're presently doing or not doing. And we will need to respond to some of our circumstances in different ways. Yes? Yes or no? Obviously, if you want to achieve something you haven't achieved, you either have to stop doing something, or do something you're not doing, or respond to situations differently. Once in Los Angeles, Srila Prabhupada said, ultimately, this is a quote, ultimately we must all fly our own airplane. What Prabhupada meant was that although he can teach us Krishna consciousness, give us his mercy, and even pray to Krishna on our behalf, he can't force us to be Krishna conscious. I think sometimes people think if I just get a guru, I don't have to do anything, because he'll do it all. Or if I get a husband or a wife or whatever. And by the way, if there are any typos here when I'm reading, you can all stare at Sadhurupa and give her a dirty look, because it's her fault. No, you don't have to do that. If there's a typo, I won't read it, just to save you. But in this version, there's supposedly no typos. This is, I don't know, maybe. This is the online version. Okay. We have to do the work. In this sense, our spiritual advancement is really in our own hands. So, this is interesting, because what's being said is we need to put ourselves in ideal situations to make spiritual advancement. Right? We have to follow spiritual practices, we have to get association, we have to study, we have to do all these things. But it's possible you can do all these things and not make any advancement. You agree? You could read all day, Srimad Bhagavatam. And at the end of the day, put the book down and say, I don't really care. Or I can't do that. Or I don't want to do that. Or that's impossible. Right? You could. So what Prabhupada is saying is that on a certain level, he can only, let me rephrase it, he can only help us to a certain point. But beyond that point, we have to help ourselves. It's like I say, okay, I give you all, sometimes this is done, I give you all $10,000. And I want you to come back in a year and we'll see what happened to that $10,000. So you come back with $100,000, she comes back with $1 million, and our guitar player here comes back with a $10,000 guitar. Yes? Well, I don't know. It'd be hard. Maybe not 110. You need 4 guitars for 10,000, yeah. Or 3 good ones. Yeah. Well, maybe you could find one for 10. Maybe John Lennon played it, so it's 10,000. So she comes back with the guitar John Lennon played. Then someone else comes back with no money. They invested it, they lost it, or they just bought a lot of clothes, like that. So that's the idea. The spiritual master is giving you the investment that you have to invest in. And according to how it's not, okay, I have $10,000, but it doesn't mean next year I have 10,000. I may have nothing, or I may have 100,000 or 1 million. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's just like that. No one can chant our rounds for us, read Srimad Bhagavatam for us, or do devotional service for us. We all have access to the same knowledge and guidance, yet we utilize this bhakti process differently. How we apply the wisdom is our choice. No one is choosing for us. It might seem there's some social pressure or influence of our conditioning, but ultimately we're choosing. And I like this point. No one can chant our rounds for us. One teacher said no one can do your push-ups for you. It's kind of like going to the gym and just say, okay, do some push-ups for me. Prabhu, here are my beads. Could you finish my rounds? I'm sure that's going to happen someday. Maybe it's already happened. I don't know. Is it okay if my husband's my guru, could he chant my rounds for me? Would that be okay? We can't blame anyone for our lack of Krishna consciousness. We may want to blame or try to blame, but it doesn't help us progress. Like, let's say you're not doing well in your spiritual life and you find someone to blame. Okay, it's your fault. But that doesn't help you become Krishna conscious. Right? Well, if this didn't happen and he didn't say this and he didn't do that, I would be more Krishna conscious. Okay, fine. Is that helping you become Krishna conscious? Of course not. It's just convincing you you have no control. Is it true you have no control? Of course not. This is leading to something. So stay with me. We're going to hit the volcano. It's going to explode. Blaming is an excuse for not taking responsibility. Some blame the past, their parents, their karma, their spouse, their jobs, or their leaders. How many excuses have you made or heard? I've made and heard hundreds. Yet with every excuse we make, we take a step away from Krishna. A step away from taking responsibility for our own spiritual advancement. So, think about it. If you need excuses, if you need reasons why you can't be more spiritually advanced, there's plenty. Just look in the mirror, you'll find tons of them in your own heart, right? Good ones too, juicy ones, like really, wow, look at this one. Look at this one I found, Prabhu, this is a good one. My mother, the way she treated me, I'm a total mess right now. That's a good one, you like it? There's so many, I've done so many sinful things. I've taken so many drugs, so many girlfriends, boyfriends, etc. There's so many good excuses. But Prabhupada, he always told us that the process of bhakti is more powerful than anything you've done. So it's more powerful than any excuse. You wanted to say something?
I was thinking about, because my family was really strange, no? And these things to give the guilty to my father is very familiar to me.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but since I was starting to chanting, I was thinking, but actually my father did not this to me, but he did to himself before the meal. Now I get some reaction of this, but he did to himself. And this kind of thinking was helpful for me because it's about responsibility. I have responsibility about myself, and
yes,
now
yes.
I feel as well as my...
Yeah. That's the bottom line in everything. Obviously there's influences around us, but ultimately you decide how you'll be influenced. But the problem is, if you think you have a justifiable reason for not progressing spiritually, then that can become the cause for you remaining separate from Krishna. Because you believe this is because of this I can't. That's not true. Sometimes we believe that anyone in our situation would act the same way, that we are simply products of circumstances. Don't fool yourself. Some people do act differently. If you ever say, anyone in my situation would have done the same thing, then I have a question for you. Would you be willing to take all the money you have and everything in your house and put it on a table and say, I will bet this is absolutely true. I will bet you what I just said is absolutely true. Raise your hand if you do that. Nobody would do it because we know it's not absolutely true. Right? Have you ever felt like that? Anyone in my situation would act this way. Okay, you believe that? How much you want to bet? It's not absolutely true. And because we don't want to lose all our money, we probably would say, well, maybe it's not. It can't be true that anyone would act like that. So we give an example. Jayananda Prabhu, one of Srila Prabhupada's. Isn't this a great book? I think you should all get a copy and plus 10 copies for all your friends and 10 for your enemies. They will become your friends if they read the book.
24 enemies.
What?
Double 20.
24 enemies, what? The mind, the five senses, the mind. Jayananda Prabhu, one of Srila Prabhupada's early disciples, was hospitalized with leukemia. Although his body was falling apart, he rose every morning at, what time did he rise? 3:30. He rose at 3:30 to perform his devotional activities, which included a full program, just like we do at the temple. He also arranged to have regular Gita classes with other patients. Plus, Jayananda would walk around the hospital to meet people and introduce them to Krishna and invite them to his class. Okay, so now you have leukemia, you're in the hospital, what do? Oh, Krishna doesn't love me. Why did this happen to me? Am I going to get cured? This is horrible. I'm so bad. Whatever, right? So this is my example of not everyone in your situation would act the same way.
But we may give an argument that Jayananda Prabhu was a special person.
Yeah, and you too can become special by following his example.
Because when I'm hearing such things, I become guilty. I feel guilty because probably I won't be able to behave the way that
You can do it. Don't convince yourself you can't. Yeah, obviously, this example is not there to make us think we could all do this, but it's an example to make us think that not everyone in our situation would act this way. It gets better. Don't go away, it gets better. Okay, so the question, would you have done that? So most or all of us would say, probably not, at least not that much. So here's the icing on the cake. The hospital told him, we can't let you walk around talking to people about Krishna, you can't have a class. And I've told the story before. And you know what he said? Well, if I can't do that, I'm going to leave the hospital. And that's what he did. He left the hospital. That's unusual, obviously. But it just goes to show that, you know, there's so many stories of people, disadvantaged people, with odds against you, and you succeed. And everybody loves those stories, don't you? Don't you love those stories? The poor kid from Africa, who used to run, 10 miles to deliver letters and this and that, and gets an opportunity. He wins the Olympic marathon, this and that. Everybody loves that. When we don't do what may be possible for us to do, We often blame someone or something for our failure. Yes or yes?
Yes.
You know why we do that? We discussed that in the workshop, in the retreat. You know ultimately why we do it? The real reason? Because it feels good. Last year I gave you 10,000. How much? And we go around and she has 100,000, you have 1,000,000, she has 50,000. She bought 10 guitars, but then she sold them for 10 times more, and so she has 200,000, and we're going around. And Mahatma Prabhu, how much do you have? I have nothing. But the reason I have nothing is because my wife spent it all on jewelry or something, you know. So I don't feel like I'm a loser. I don't feel guilty, no shame. I just feel I'm a product of circumstance. So I'll read that sentence again. When we don't do what may be possible to do, we often blame someone or something for our failure. It is best that we see blame for what it is, a rationalization for not doing as much as Krishna is asking of us. The following conversation shows how we can foolishly rationalize why we won't surrender to Krishna. So, the context of this conversation is that these are the devotees who went with Prabhupada to India. If you know the history, at that time in ISKCON, 1970, our main outreach was to go on the street and chant, do Sankirtan on the street. But people didn't understand us, and a lot of homeless people and a lot of beggars would go out in the street and chant, and so they were thinking we were beggars or homeless. So Prabhupada said, all right, we won't do that. We'll do another program. We'll make life members. We'll get people to give a certain amount of money, and we'll give them all our books, and they'll get a magazine every month. So it was a way that was more appropriate at that time. So now, one of Prabhupada's disciples, Guru Kripa, is discussing kinds of conversations he's having with people when he asks them to be life members. They say that when Krishna desires, I will serve him. In other words, they're asking, could you become a life member, and this is the price? And their answer is, when Krishna desires, I'll do it. But now he's not desiring. That's a good excuse, right? He's not inspiring me to do it. Devotees, I think we should get up early and go to the temple. Krishna's, when he wants me to get up early, I will get up early. He's not inspiring me, no, that's the answer. So what Prabhupada says is what he wants them to say. So he's taking their position of how he would reply. What do you mean he is not inspiring you? He is directly saying, you do that, you surrender to me. Isn't this his instruction, and isn't it for everyone? But they will say, he's not inspiring me personally. That's a good excuse, right? Well, here in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says this and that. Yeah, but he didn't come to my house to say it. That's a good excuse. Well, actually, it's a dumb excuse. But people think like this. So Prabhupada's answer. Just see how foolish people are. Krishna's saying directly, do this, and they're saying, he is not inspiring. Mahamsa. They say, quote, only by Krishna's mercy, I will be able to surrender to him. So they say to the devotee, you have His mercy, so you've surrendered. But His mercy has not come to me, so I have not surrendered. Have you ever heard that excuse before? That's one of the best excuses I've ever heard. What do you think? That's a good one. You can surrender because you have His mercy. I can't because I don't have His mercy. Here's punchline. So Prabhupada says, and if you don't accept the mercy, then whose fault is it? I am giving you Krishna's mercy. You take it. And if you do not take it, then is it my fault? That's what you're supposed to tell them. They're saying, I can't do this because I don't have Krishna's mercy. No, I'm giving it to you. And there was a similar conversation. And they said, I guess it's part of this conversation. I didn't include it in the book. And they said, my dear sir, we would like you to become a life member. We will give you all our books. We can stay in our temples for 3 days. We'll get our magazine every month. Any temple around the world, you stay for 3 days. And they say, when Krishna tells me to do it, I will do it. And Prabhupada's answer was interesting. He said, you tell them, I am Krishna's servant, I represent Krishna. So if I ask you or tell you to do it, that's the same as Krishna. Krishna has come, and He's telling you. Okay. So now we're getting to this point of self-envy. Here's an explanation. Prabhupada doesn't use the word, but we could say this is his definition. Well, let me preface this. So let me go back. If you don't accept mercy, then whose fault is it? I am giving you Krishna's mercy, you take it. And if you do not take it, then is it my fault? That's a quote by Prabhupada. Krishna has eternally given us the freedom to reject Him. And if we are determined to do so, then nothing will change our resolve. Yes? Like we wish it were different. Please, Krishna, don't let me do this. Give me the right intelligence. Give me the determination. Yeah. That's good. We pray that way. But ultimately, we understand we always have that freedom to choose one way or the other. So here's a quote from Prabhupada. So you voluntarily accept this cycle of birth, and you don't accept Krishna, then who can help you? If you have decided to cut your own throat, how can I help you? You'll do it. Whenever you get the opportunity, you'll cut your throat. How much can I give you protection? That is going on. They have no faith in the words of Krishna. So, this is an example. This is an example of what Prabhupada means by self-envy. You remember I said, I think it was last week I was explaining this, how the word for envy in Sanskrit also means destruction. So self-envy means self-destruction. So if you go out and commit suicide, you've destroyed yourself. So in that sense, you become envious of yourself because you're destroying yourself. You're harming yourself. So that's an example Prabhupada's giving. If you're going to do this, who can help you? And then we'll read some other examples. Why Bilva Thakur went to Vrindavan to worship Krishna is one of my favorite stories. And this was told in detail by Prabhupada to Allen Ginsberg. So I'll just tell the story. Bilva Mangala was born a Brahmin. But he fell from that position. And the story we hear is later in his life. And he had a girlfriend / prostitute. In those days, prostitute, girlfriend, one of the same thing. And there was this, so she lived across the river, and this night there was this huge storm. So he would come every night, and she saw the storm and thought, he's not coming, so she locked the gate, closed the door, everything. And he was so much attached to her that even during the storm he came. And there's so many details, we don't have time, but he underwent a lot of trouble to come. He could have died. And she couldn't believe that he came. He had to climb over the fence. I think he grabbed onto a dead body, was it? When he crossed the river, we thought it was a log, it was a dead body. And then something about a snake, he thought it was a rope and a snake. It was a major ordeal. It'd be good for a movie. And so when she saw him, it was like, this is unbelievable. I can't believe that you're so attached to me that you would risk your life during this fierce storm to cross the river. No one in the, it's like there's a cyclone and the waves are like 50 feet and you go out swimming. It's like crazy. So she looked at him and said, she said, I don't know if she said, oh my God, but for dramatic effect, we'll say, she said, oh my God. I can't believe this. Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? And then she said, if you had this much devotion for Krishna, how great a devotee you would be. And it just like struck a chord because he had that from his youth and he lost it. And when she said that, it was like, totally transformed. And at that moment, he made a determination, a decision to go to Vrindavan. So, the reason I like that story is because a lot of times, when I say you have a choice, then the yeah, but will be, yeah, but what if you're in the mode of ignorance? Your willpower is so weak. Or what if you just by nature have, you say, I have a choice, but I have weak willpower, and I'm a very uncontrolled person, so it doesn't seem like I have a choice. Do you ever feel like that? You ever feel like you're in a situation and you're addicted to hitting that button on your computer or on your phone or somewhere that you know you shouldn't hit, and you do it anyway, and you can't stop yourself. Even though your wife told you, if you do it one more time, I will beat you up and throw you out the window, and still you do it. So this story shows us that even though you may be in this helpless position and you feel like you can't make the right decision, you can. He did it in 1 second. You know how long it takes to make a decision? How long do you think it takes to make a decision?
1 second.
1 second. Of course, it could take you 10 years before you make that 1 second decision. But it's nice to know it only takes a second, ultimately.
So how to get to this point?
We get to this point.
Yeah, because sometimes
You need a guru who tells you you're really
but
dumb.
sometimes Guru might tell us, but still we are pushing the button.
That's the whole point. You have to be smart. Well, let's read in this. There's a verse in Bhagavatam there. Maybe it'll answer your question. We can discuss your question more. Let's read the verse. It explains this situation. Any person who engages himself within this material world in performing activities that necessitate great struggle, and who, after obtaining a human form of life, which is a chance to attain liberation from miseries, undertakes the difficult tasks of fruitive activities, must be considered to be cheated and envious of his own self. So it's a nice way to think, that I'm cheating myself. Which then, if this is true, of course it is true, if this is true, more self, then part of one answer to your question is more self-love. You remember that little mantra I have? You all know about temptation, right? Temptation. The carrot in front of you. You know about that? The thing that you shouldn't do, that you love to do. And you sometimes, in the back of your mind, you just think, I hope I never come across that thing. Because if I do, it's going to be difficult. So, I was thinking about this. We all know what that, you know what your temptation is, right? You know what it is. You know your weakness. You know what it is. You know what it is. So sometimes we pray, Krishna, don't ever put me in that situation, because if you do, I don't know if I could make it. I'm not sure I could. Isn't it? Like, what is that situation? You get it in your mind. So I was thinking about that. I think, well, if I were in that situation, I know from the sober state that I don't want, I know it's a weak point, but I know I don't want to give into it. So then I began thinking, well, if I'm going to give into it, there must be some lack of self-love that I would do something that would be destructive for myself. Right? There must, at some level, there must be some apathy about self-care, or whatever word you want to use, self-care, self-love, self-compassion. There must be someone. So then I came with a mantra. You want to hear it? It goes like this. I would never do, I love myself too much to do that, to allow myself to do that. Because I know the consequence would be disastrous on some level. So I love myself too much to allow myself to do that. That's my mantra. But the mantra doesn't work if you don't love yourself enough to do that. But maybe by saying it, it will increase self-love, self-respect, self-care. Or you can change the words if you don't like love. I care for myself too much to allow myself to give into that. What do you think? If Prabhupada's talking about self-envy, then I think it's logical that we can say the remedy for self-envy is self-care, self-love, self-affection, self-compassion. You agree? There must be. Yes.
Why sometimes we are doing things that are destroying ourselves. We are trying to destroy ourselves.
Why are we doing it? Because there's a number of reasons. We're conditioned to do it. We've been doing it for many lives. And it's something we want to enjoy. So the psychological mechanism will be to kind of blank out all the reasons we shouldn't do it and pretend that this is just normal, or I'm weak, or whatever. Because the desire to have that is so strong. And you could also say, for some things, I think it's just addiction. You know, the whole, like I have a friend who's addicted to Facebook. And he went to a therapist. You know what the therapist said? She said, you're addicted. I can't break your addictions. All I can recommend is minimize your use. You tell me that?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. Crazy. But I think the best person to answer that question is you. But I could offer some suggestion. If it's like, let's give an example. You like to do something, but the consequence of doing that is going to be painful. And so I say, if you do, there's something you want to eat or want to do or whatever it is, and I say the consequence is painful. And I say, but by not doing it, you'll get this other consequence. And if you look at that, back and forth, analyze it, meditate on it, with some self-love and care, it's going to be easier to control yourself. This is just my personal realization. I think we need more self-care to be able to control those temptations. I think we don't care enough. Have you ever said, I'm going to go on a diet? Raise your hand if you ever said, I'm going on a diet. You don't have to be overweight. It could just be, going healthy. What did you do the next day? Did you tell yourself, I'll start it the day after? Yeah. I think we can say, for many of us, it's a conditioned response. I mean, you could say it's a it demonstrates laziness, lack of determination, so many things. But even those things are conditioned. So, how do you break a conditioned behavior? There has to be strong reasons to do it, right? And I can't think of a stronger reason than love of God. That's like the best reason to do anything. And it's the best reason to give up anything you're attached to, isn't it? At least give it up enough so it's not, you don't have to give it up in one day, but give up enough that it's not an impediment. At least you have a 50-50 chance of becoming purified. And if you see, you're going to run into, this is how it's going to look, okay? If you're not awake, please wake up. 1, 2, 3, wake up. You're going to run into two things. First thing is, you run into it, is the understanding of what you should do. Maybe there's more than two things. The next thing you have to realize is how much of it you can do, how quickly. So I might say, okay, you should have good reasons to break this habit. And so you come up with the good reasons. But you're still conditioned by that habit. And so the question is, can you break it immediately? And in many cases, the answer will be no, I can't. So you need a strategy. What can I do now? Okay, I can eat 1 sweet a day instead of 5. That's feasible. Okay, let's do that. You're starting to break patterns. So you have the desire, the understanding, why, and then you have to assess your ability and how long it will take. But as I've said many times, any behavior you practice reinforces itself. So if you want to break a habit, you have to stop, you have to break that habit through a better behavior that's consistent. Because every time, this is the bad news. Raise your hand if you want bad news, but it'll help you. This is the unfortunate reality. That every time you do something, it reinforces itself, the tendency to do it, unless it's something you really hate. But considering it's something you do regularly, or maybe you don't like it, but you can't stop it, so you do it. So every time you do it, it reinforces that action. So if you're trying to break a habit with another action, that reinforces the new action. If you give in to the habit, it reinforces it. So if I give in today, it's going to be harder to give up tomorrow. If I do it every day this week, it's going to be harder to give up next week. Is there anything you love, you really love, to do, to think, to have, to eat, that's completely destructive, physically, emotionally, or spiritually? If there is, you have to have a strategy to overcome it, because otherwise, I would say you're killing yourself voluntarily, drinking poison. You know that song? Narottam Das. He said, although I've taken birth in a human life, I uselessly drank poison because I forgot you and I engaged in material life. So I voluntarily, uselessly and voluntarily I drank poison. That's a nice meditation. I'm killing myself voluntarily. So, you know, what Prabhupada did a lot to help us overcome ourselves, this is basically what we're talking about, right? Overcoming ourselves. What he did a lot was he dangled the carrot in front of us. He said, this is what if you do this, this is what you're going to get. And he used to talk about, you're going to see Krishna, you're going to dance with Krishna, you're going to go back to Godhead in this life. That's a big, long carrot. It's got a lot of diamonds in it. And, you know, it's like, isn't it? So by, so to speak, dangling the carrot, Prabhupada felt that we would be able to do what was necessary because the prize was so great. And therefore the inspiration, the determination, whatever it was we needed, the enthusiasm, would match the prize. It would be equal to what was required to get there. And that's why we wouldn't say it's too hard or I can't do it, it's too difficult. It wouldn't matter because the prize is like, that's it. That's what life is for. What else are you going to do? And if you don't get the prize, what do you get? Another body. Okay. Here's the answer to all your butt questions. You die, and you're not Krishna conscious, and you take birth again, and you get to spend 9 months in the womb. How does that sound? Sound like a plan? And then you get out, and everything you learned in school in this body, you've lost it. You don't know. You don't know how to talk, read, write, math, science. It's all lost. So you have to learn it all again. And for the first year and a half, or sometimes even more, you can't express yourself. The only way you can express yourself is to cry and kick and pound. And it's totally frustrating. And I saw this with my daughter. She was so frustrated until she could talk. Because she couldn't tell us that she's hungry or tired or whatever she needed. And then you grow up. And hopefully you have 2 parents. Well, first thing is hopefully you didn't get killed in the womb. I don't know statistically what the chances are, but first you have to get out of the womb, and then will you have 2 parents, and you like your school, and will your friends bully you, and it's like, you want to do that again? Raise your hand if you want to do that again. Nobody wants to do that again. So in these ways, Prabhupada was showing us, okay, here is your body, it's getting old, Young girls have some really bad news for you. This is really depressing. Someday you're going to be old, and you're not going to be so beautiful. That's depressing, isn't it?
Yeah.
They have that, right? FaceTime, what's it called? On Apple, you put your picture in and they show you what you're going to look like, 30 years later, and it's like, oh my God. That's depressing. So it was in this way Prabhupada was helping us. Okay, it's difficult to change. It's difficult to give up temptation. It's difficult to control yourself. But he was saying, if you don't, this is what you get. And if you do, this is what you get. And we said, okay, I'm going to go for it. So the trick is to go for it according to what's balanced and real and capable for you. But at least to go for it. So you're making progress. And then that would underscore the point we're making here, that you have the choice to do that. How, on what level you do it, you can't just say, I'm going to jump to the moon. No. But you can do better than you're doing now. That's the idea. Does that make sense? Want me to say it again? You've got it. Okay, let's use a practical example. let's say you're my daughter and you're 18 and you're thinking, what am I going to do? Should I go to university? Should I, maybe I could just follow the Grateful Dead wherever they play. Go to concerts like that. We're trying to figure out what to do. So you just look at ramifications. Okay, following the Grateful Dead will be easy, but after a few months you won't have any money because you're not working. You go, no, I'll just panhandle. I'll get people to give me money. Okay, it's a way of life. But you don't know how much you'll get and if you have a place to stay. They say, you could go to university, but it's going to be much more difficult. But probably when you graduate, you'll have more financial security. So you're looking, and then so eventually you decide, well, probably having financial security is important, so I'll do the austerity. And so you're going to university, and your teachers are piling you up with homework, and you're having to learn science and statistics and math and this and that, and your head's exploding. But then you remember why I'm doing this. Because I have a goal. Whether it's financial security or a profession that you love or whatever. That keeps you going. Right? And that's practical. Because so many people do that. Right? And sometimes you get a professor you don't like, but you tolerate. Right? So Prabhupada did the same thing with Krishna. This is what you get. You get to dance with God. Sound good? Yeah, Prabhupada, sounds good. Okay, sign me up. What do I have to do? This is the program. And if you don't, then, good luck. Who knows what will happen. And then one time, Prabhupada scared us. And he said, well, if you don't go back to Godhead, Scripture says you'll be born in an advantageous position. Then he said, but it doesn't mean you'll take advantage of it. So it's the same point I was making in the beginning. Advantageous situations only mean they're advantageous for people who take advantage of them. Right? So he said, you may be born in the family of devotees and decide not to be a devotee. It's possible. Right? Yes or yes?
Yes.
Da ili da.
Pravda.
Pravda ili pravda. C or C. We or we.
Tak.
Tak or tak. How do you say or in French? We ou we. We ou we. We ou we. You parle français. We ou we. We ou we. We ou we. Anything else? Anything more? Anything less? Okay. Yes?
Even if we understand parts of it, of what we can get if we do all austerities, what is our biggest
I'll
obstacle?
repeat it. Even if we understand the austerity, what's the biggest obstacle? Well, Prabhupada was asked that question. He said, "You're the biggest obstacle. Your own self is the biggest obstacle. The mind. The mind. It's the same answer. Prabhupada wrote a prayer, and he was praying, and he used the word. It was used, I think, in one of the sessions yesterday, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj, and he said, you may have heard this. Prabhupada was praying to Krishna or praying to his spiritual master. Please help me overcome my causeless unwillingness to serve you. So it's the biggest obstacle is just our conditioned self, and all that can. But as long as we realize that it may be an obstacle, but it's not an obstacle we can't deal with, and these are normal obstacles you have to go through. That the holy name is powerful, and your sincerity is more powerful than any negative thing that you're facing, then you'll be okay. I mean, you know how powerful it is to be here in Mayapur, right? And so when we're here, we have lots of realizations. And some of the realizations are fairly deep. So that means Krishna's helping us, even though We weren't born as devotees, and we may have done many bad things, but you can see the power in the spiritual process. I think it's the same answer. The biggest obstacle is the choices I make, the decisions I make. What time are you going to go to bed tonight? You're going to eat, you're going to not eat. What time are you going to get up? Have you set aside the time for studying? You're going to chant. How many rounds are you going to chant? When are you going to finish? All these things. All the things we talked about at the retreat. What are your rules? Okay, this is what I want to do, so I make rules. It's a reflection of my decision. And in order to continually make those decisions, we always have to be clear on why we should make those decisions, and that's where hearing classes and reading comes in, because reading and hearing classes plays into the why. Why is about purpose. So why should I do this? But if we don't hear and study, we forget the why. And then we're in this social environment where everyone's trying to progress materially, and that seems like, well, that's, I guess, what I should do because everyone else is doing it. Isn't it? So being surrounded by devotees and spiritual processes and knowledge, it's necessary. It's more necessary, I think, than ever before because of the culture that's around us. And you all know, even though you know, but if you get in a culture which is antagonistic to what you know, you start acting, because that's the power of culture, the power of influence. I know I shouldn't smoke, but you're smoking. After a while I smoke. Or drink, or whatever it is. Right?
Shouldn't we be...
Yes?
You're talking about association, but in a devotee circle also there's someone might be having material desires.
Yeah.
So that you can find the like-minded devotees.
Yeah.
That's very important.
Well,
but in that case, do I need to pray to Krishna, get a like-minded devotees?
General good advice is like-minded and more advanced also. That's very helpful. Yeah. If we're associating with someone and it's detrimental to our bhakti, then we don't have to hate them. It's not good. It's like eating a food. I hate beets because they give me a stomachache. I really don't hate them. It's just not good for me. Something like that. Someone made a comment.
I have a question also regarding to what she said. Is it not that we should just be also very strong, because if we are only in devotees association, and then we have to deal with so-called normal people, and then we are so weak that we cannot be around them. So it's not that we have to make ourselves very strong. We can be Krishna conscious in every situation.
That's the idea.
Sometimes I think that devotees are running away, escaping, everything is Maya, Maya. And then, a little thing and they are just giving up Krishna consciousness.
Well, Prabhupada addressed that because what you say is true, but on some stages of devotional service, the devotee is too weak to be able to deal with those situations. So it's definitely not a mature stage. But then if you're not on the mature stage, what do? It's like you're sick, you better stay inside. You've had some flu, but you should be over the flu by now, but you're not. So you have to take care of yourself. So both things are true. Prabhupada addressed that. He saw the behavior of some of his disciples, and it wasn't really proper. But he said, he understood, he said they're weak and they're trying to protect themselves. So they're acting immaturely. But it was all, they had to do it. They weren't strong enough. So yeah, we should become strong enough. There's a question here. How do you know the difference between a desire that's going to help your Krishna conscious and a desire that's not going to help? Ask your mother. Well, she's not a devotee. I think it requires some self-honesty also. And so many desires can be used in Krishna consciousness, and there's some desires that cannot be used. So we want to start with there. Can this desire be employed? Okay, let's say, for example, this is Gopinath asking. So, example, say I really like big houses and beautiful houses on beautiful properties. Is that just the desire I have to just try to be happy in this world, or can this be a spiritual desire? Well, it could be either one. Depends how you use it. So, what are you going to use the house for? Make a big, big, big room in that house that fits 100 devotees. That's good. That's nice. But in answer to your question also, the thing is, we're not pure, so we have desires. So another way to ask the question is, what do I do with the desires I have? Rather than knowing the difference, what do I do with them? Try to use them in service. Like Krishna Kanta likes to play guitar. And if she doesn't play guitar someday, she's going to go crazy. Maybe
Does it not that those desires are sometimes, like fulfilling those desires are a kind of excuse? Let's say that I want to have like super cool car, and then I'm making an excuse. Yeah,
super
I really
cool car or guitar?
Super cool, like I don't know, Mercedes S-Class or something like that, very expensive. And I'm thinking, okay, I really need this car because then I'm gonna, I don't know, drive devotees somewhere. But this is just an excuse, you know. I just want to have this car, and I don't want to admit it that I want to have a car.
Yeah, it could be. But sometimes you have to give in because you'll be thinking about that car if you don't buy it, or like the rest of your life. What? You become a rubber, maybe a rubber tree in your next life.
What?
Rubber. Tires are made of rubber. So become a rubber tree, yeah. See that, so that's another thing. So it's like, so then you might say, well, it would be best for my spiritual life that I give this up. So I'm trying to give it up, but the problem is I'm always thinking about it. So it's not really good for my spiritual life to be thinking about a Mercedes S750. But I am, and I can't stop thinking about it.
But it seems that there is no end of material desires. So let's say you have this car, and then you are not thinking about this car, you are thinking about the better one.
That's more of a materialistic attitude. You would find that less in the devotee community, but it would just keep increasing because we're becoming purified.
Who are keeping increased.
What?
I know devotees like that who are like expanding.
Are they devotees?
It seems they are.
Well, then you have to define a devotee by what a devotee does and doesn't do. Or very, well, let's just say not standard behavior for a devotee. That's not standard behavior for a devotee. Standard behavior is I have a need, I can't give it up, I fulfill it, and then I just go on with my Krishna consciousness, and now that's over. I've got it, and I don't think about it. And keep that Mercedes 760 for at least 25 years. That would be nice. Save the environment. Okay? We can stop. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki